Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give this a few more minutes, let everyone come in, and then we're going to get started. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope everyone's having a great day, staying dry on this dreary Thursday afternoon. Like I said, I'm very excited everyone got to be here and is attending with me today. Give it another minute or two, let a few other people join in, and then we'll get started. At any point, if there's anything, any questions you have, anything you want to ask, please feel free to use the chat feature. If that's not working for you, you can always use the Q&A. But if you have anything that comes to your mind, please feel free at any point to pop in a question, and I'll be happy to take a few breaks throughout this and answer them. So it's a little after 3 o'clock. We're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this Thursday afternoon. So happy you're able to take the time to end your day to be here with me. My name is Megan Conley. I am the Science of Reading Director here at Inspired Instruction. And today our webinar focus is going to be on exploring the science of reading in the revised NJSLS for ELA. And we're really going to hone in and focus on those foundational skills. And we're really going to think about what those foundational standards are in the revised NJSLS. And then we'll really go through some evidence-based practices that teachers can use for alignment to the new language of these standards. So let's dive in. Our agenda for today, we're going to accomplish 4 things in this hour together. First, we're going to discuss the cognitive research behind the science of reading. After that, we'll explore the components of the revised foundational skills for both reading and writing. After that, we'll discuss evidence-based practices and different activities that are aligned to these revised standards. And then last, we'll discuss next steps and helpful resources that I'm going to share with you to help you on your journey throughout this. So before we begin, let's start with a self-reflection. How much do you know about the science of reading? I'm sure all of you, we love to talk in acronyms in education. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about SOR, the acronym, the science of reading. But how much do you really know about the science of reading? So there's 3 numbers you see here for a self-reflection. One is you've heard of the term, but you're not really sure what it means. 2, you're familiar with some of the research, but you'd love to learn more. Or 3, you feel like you're a pro. You're very familiar with the cognitive brain research. You're familiar with Scarborough's reading rope, the simple view of reading, and the connection to the revised standards. So give everyone about 30 seconds to think on that. And then if you could please in the chat, type where you are today. Where are you on this journey? Are you at a 1, a 2, or a 3? So I'll give you a moment to self-reflect, and then I'm going to pull up the chat now. Take a look where everyone's at. I'm seeing we have some people at a 2. Thank you, Christina. And if for whatever reason, if the chat's not working, please feel free to use the Q&A, whatever works best for you today. Anyone else want to jump in? Great, thanks. Dominique, I see you're at a 2. Donna's at a 2. Great, I'm seeing a lot of 2s. Kathy, Tiffany, Sharon. Excellent. So I'm glad you'd love to learn more. And even if you feel like you're at a 1, that's okay. If you feel like you're at a 3, that's awesome. But I'm going to share a lot of different activities and resources that no matter where you're at, you will be able to implement these, take these back to your schools, and help support teachers in your school. So let's start with our science of reading overview, and let's jump into some of the cognitive research behind the science of reading. So first, what is the science of reading? Like I said before, we talk so much in acronyms in education, and I'm sure you've heard of this acronym SOR. And we think, what is that? So SOR is the science of reading, and it's that vast interdisciplinary body of research. The research has actually been around for 25 years. So it's not new, but it is something that's got a lot more recognition these past few years. And it's something that states have started acting on. And at this point, there's 32 states plus the district, DC public schools, plus New York City public schools that have all passed state legislature around the science of reading. And what the research shows is it shows issues relating to reading and writing and best practices for instruction around reading and writing, evidence-based practices. And it includes evidence to inform the following: how proficient reading and writing develop, why some children have difficulty with both reading and writing, how we can most effectively assess students and teach our students, and how to improve student outcomes through prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. So, a lot of times we talk about our students who might be struggling, our highest support students, and we talk about intervention for them. But a lot of the research behind the science of reading actually shows us best practices that we can use to help prevent some of those reading difficulties with really evidence based quality instruction. In addition, the science of reading helps us to understand the different cognitive processes and the neural pathways that are essential for reading proficiency. So, on the next slide, we're going to highlight the brain research behind this. So, we're going to take a look at this brief video around the brain research and the neural pathways on the left hemisphere that are activated in the reading brain. I hope everyone can hear this. If you can, please just put it in the chat or Q&A.
What do we know about the complex process of learning to read? Surprisingly, a lot. Scientific research collected over the past 4 decades reveals what happens in the brain and what must happen in the classroom to enable skillful reading. Most children learn to walk and talk naturally without a lot of support from adults. But reading is different. Reading is not hardwired in the brain, and the neural pathways involved must be developed through successful instructional experiences. Let's look at the reading brain. The parts of the brain that allow us to process sounds and recognize visual images are already in place at birth in the left hemisphere. However, the phonological assembly region is not intact at birth. This is the part of the brain that allows us to connect speech sounds with visual images, such as letters, and enables reading. And it must be built through explicit, systematic phonics instruction and practice with decoding.
So I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen that brief video before, but I think it's a great visual of around the reading brain and really those neural pathways that need to be formed in our students to make sure that all students can become those skilled readers. And let's dive into this a little bit more. I have another image I want to show you. So here you can see the reading brain. And as we learned in the video, we have our frontal region. And let me click so you can see where that is. That's right here. It's designated in that light blue color. And that's at the front part of the brain. It's already intact at birth, and that allows a person to process speech sounds as we listen to and then speak. What else is intact at birth is the occipital lobe. And you can see I circled that right here. That's in the back of the brain, and it's like highlighted here. It's colored, shaded in that pink color. And that's where the brain stores the appearance and meaning of words. But what isn't intact at birth is the part of the brain that does the job of word analysis or sound symbol connection. That's phoneme and graphemes, the sounds and the letters or symbols that represent them. And that's in the parietal lobe. And the parietal lobe you can see right here, it's shaded in that yellow color. And this has to be developed with direct, explicit instruction like we saw in the video. So through the research, what we have learned is that our brain is wired for speech to print, sounds, and then the letters, the graphemes that represent them. And what that means for us in terms of instruction and what we want to see in classrooms is an explicit focus on oral language and phonological and phonemic awareness instruction, because that's how our brain is hardwired for speech to print. So we want to leverage that. That's not only going to help our highest support students, but it's going to help support all students and be able to form those explicit connections and neural pathways to enable that skilled reading. And let's dive into another piece of research. So I don't want to give too much, but I do want to highlight one more key component of some of the research behind the science of reading. and that's Scarborough's reading rope. I wish I could see you to ask how many of you thumbs up are familiar with Scarborough's reading rope, but looking at the Q&A, I see most of you put it 2, so I'm sure some 2.5 I see Lindsay said. So I'm sure some of you are very familiar, at least have seen or heard of Scarborough's reading rope. And this rope highlights the essential components of reading. It was created by Dr. Hollis Scarborough. Well, if you've ever heard of her or not, she was a leading researcher of early language development. And she invented the concept of the reading rope in the early 90s. And why she did it was she was speaking to parents, and she wanted to help parents understand all the various skills that their children needed in order to master, to become skilled and proficient readers. And originally, how she did this was she took pipe cleaners and she started weaving them together to demonstrate her point. And thus, Scarborough's reading rope was formed. And this reading rope consists of 2 strands. We have our upper strand for language comprehension, that's everything colored in blue. And the components of language comprehension are background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. So all of those strands go in to make up the language comprehension component. And then our bottom strands are our word recognition strands. And there's 3 components of word recognition. That's phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. And if you think about one strand of hair or one pipe cleaner, it's not very strong. But when it's woven together, so if we have all the word recognition strands woven together, all the language comprehension strands woven together. And then if we weave those together, we're going to form readers that are increasingly strategic with their language comprehension, increasingly automatic with their word recognition. And that is our goal, to create overall skilled readers. But what we know as educators doing this for a long time, even if you haven't been doing this just for a few years, this will not happen overnight, and that's okay. It's going to require direct, explicit instruction and practice over time. So now that we talked about some of that research behind the science of reading and the acronym SOR, you might be thinking, okay, Megan, that makes sense, but how does this connect to the revised K-5 standards? So let me show you how. So our NJSLS, our for ELA, had 4 components of foundational skills in those standards in 2016. And here you can see what they are. They are print concepts. And what print concepts means, understand the organization and basic features of print. In 2016, we also had phonological awareness. And I think, again, based on most of you being at 2s or 2.5s, you're familiar with that. But it's being able to identify, manipulate units of oral language, such as words, syllables, onset and rhymes, and phonemes. That all has to do with the oral language that we talked about when we talked about our brain being wired for speech to print. Next, we have the phonics and word recognition. That's being able to know and apply sound spelling patterns and word analysis skills to help our students be able to recognize and decode words so they can read them. And then our last component of foundational skills in 2016 is fluency. And that's being able our students to read with accuracy, rate, and expression. And the ultimate goal of fluency is to support comprehension. So those were our 4 categories of foundational standards in 2016. But we had a committee that came together to review them in 2022. And what they found in terms of foundational skills and the research behind the science of reading is that there's complexities in the writing process and writing processes that are under-examined, not only in the NJSLS in 2016, but also in the Common Core state learning standards. And what they noted in particular was missing was graphophonic relationships, and that involves letter-sound relationships, that phoneme grapheme, so really having explicit instruction around that, morphology, syntax, and features of text. We know how important that is, and they underscore both reading and writing, but they really weren't called out explicitly in the previous version of the standards from 2016. And this directly relates back to what I just showed you in Scarborough's reading rope. So the components that the committee felt weren't emphasized as much as they should be were in decoding with those graphophonic relationships, sight recognition, especially in terms of irregular words and orthographic mapping, which we'll talk about when we look at the language and the standards. And then language structures having to do with the syntax of sentences. So that is what was missing. The irregular words, syntax, morphology, parts of speech as well, and types of sentences. So they found this and I'm like, okay, we know this is lacking. We know this is missing. What can we do? And based on this, the committee created K-5 foundational writing expectations to complement the foundational reading section. So both the foundational skills for reading and writing are now housed under the language domain. And here you can see that. So before, the reading foundational skills were by itself in a category. Now we have the foundational skills for reading, the additional new foundational skills for writing, and both of these are housed under language. If you joined about 2 months ago, the webinar for one of my colleagues, Dr. Jacqueline Ciano, she's absolutely amazing, and she highlighted this as well during that webinar. So some of you might have seen this visual before, or you might have seen it if you looked at the framework for the revised standards. So now that we talked about the science of reading, we talked about that research and the connection, let's explore the components of these revised standards. So first, we have our foundational skills for reading language, and that's referred to as RF. We love a good acronym, like I said, in education. That's going to stay the same from what you're used to in 2016, and that's RF. The four categories that we looked at from 2016 are exactly the same. We have print concepts for kindergarten and first grade, phonological awareness for K and 1, phonics and word recognition for kindergarten through fifth grade, and fluency for kindergarten through fifth grade. So to make any connections about what you're used to in 2016, these categories, these four standards stay the same. Some of the language is updated, and we'll take a look at that in a bit, but the categories of the standards stay the same. But the reading foundational skills were enhanced based on that research that I talked about that the committee found with an emphasis on focusing on both decoding, which is reading those words, blending unknown the phonemes, and then reading them together, but also encoding words, which is going to be that writing component, because we know reading and writing go hand in hand. It's a reciprocal process. And you'll see in the language in these revised standards, much more of an emphasis on that encoding piece. Analyzing word parts and recognizing words, reinforcing the awareness of segments of sounds in speech, those phonemes, and how they link to letters. So that phoneme-grapheme relationship. And develop reading accuracy, fluency, and comprehension, because the goals of the foundational skills and fluency are really to help support comprehension of our students and create those skilled readers, like we saw the goal is with Scarborough's reading rope. And then also there's an explicit focus on those oral language skills, just like we learned in the research for how our brains are hardwired for speech to print. So those oral language skills were definitely called out new language and enhanced the older standards. Our foundational skills for writing language are referred to as WF. So you can see here the WF. They include 3 different categories: sound letter basics, which is for kindergarten, first and second grade; spelling, which is for grades kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade; and then sentence composition, which is for kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So if you support fifth grade, or if you're a fifth grade teacher, or if you're admin going into a fifth grade classroom, they're only going to focus on sentence composition. The other grades, as you can see, kindergarten will focus on all 4. So it's really just depends on which grade. But those are the 3 categories in those WF, in the writing language foundational standards. And the foundational skills for writing were created to, like I said before, complement the K-5 foundational reading section. In addition, they provide practice with the following: sound letter basics, letter formation and building stamina, which we know is so important for our early readers, and especially in kindergarten and first grade; spelling, that spelling and encoding piece is going to be huge for all students in K-5; elements of grammar. So many times when I'm in classrooms, if I'm coaching or work I've done in the past. Some teachers are like, Megan, I want to include grammar, but I'm not sure what to do. Now this explicitly calls out what features to highlight and when to do it. So there's a scope and sequence for K, 1, 2, 3, etc., which is great and it wasn't there before. It provides practice with sentence composition and the development of writing skills and habits, which we know is so important for all students, but especially our youngest learners. So to recap, we have our foundational skills for reading language, including print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics and word recognition, and fluency, just like there was in 2016. And now what was added was the foundational skills for writing language, those WF standards, and that includes sound letter basics, spelling, and sentence composition. So we talked about the connection to the science of reading and that research. We talked about the revised standards. I'm just going to pause for a minute. I'll check the chat or the Q&A. I know most of you are saying that you can't use the chat, which I apologize, but luckily there's always a backup, and that's the Q&A. If you have any questions, please type it in. And if not, I'll keep moving, but at any point, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A, and I'm happy to address it. So now let's dive into the standards, and we're going to discuss evidence-based practices and activities that accompany each standard. We'll begin by looking at those RF standards, the foundational skills for reading language. All right, let's start with print concepts. As I mentioned before, print concepts are a standard for students in kindergarten and first grade. Here's what the kindergarten standard looks like. And what I want to point out is anything that's new language that's revised for 2023, I highlighted in light blue. And if you notice here, there's nothing highlighted in light blue because this standard did not change. The exact wording is completely the same from 2016 to now 2023 or 2024. And it remains the same, demonstrate understanding of the organization and basic features of print. So if you support kindergarten teachers, if you are a kindergarten teacher that's watching this, know that for print concepts, it's the same. First grade has a slight change. Here you can see the exact language of the standard for first grade. And again, anything highlighted in that light blue color is new language. And the new language says, including those listed in RF K.1. So the committee added that language because they just want to ensure that first grade teachers understand that not only do students in first grade have to recognize and understand the role of distinguishing features of text, but they have to master all those previous skills that you can see right here that were listed in kindergarten. So they just called that out. So nothing new other than just making sure first grade teachers understand they need to go back and look at those kindergarten standards to ensure that students have mastered all of those skills. Now that we talked about the standard, and this is going to be the format for each standard, we're going to think about what's a really great activity that we can use in our classroom to support print concepts. Wonderful activity that I personally love so much. I used it with my own kids when I was in a classroom teaching, when I was a coach, are alphabet arcs. Alphabet arcs is a fabulous way for students to provide practice with matching uppercase letters. They can also use it for lowercase letters as well. And let me show you what that looks like. We have two different alphabet arcs. This is a full alphabet arc. It's exactly that. It's the alphabet in the shape of an arc. And what students would do is you would give students magnetic letters. You could use letter tiles. The problem with letter tiles that are squares, if you go to put that square over J, they might accidentally cover up the I and the K because it's not the exact shape. So that's why really for alphabet arcs, I'm a big proponent of using magnetic letters. But what the students would do is they would have a laminated copy. Doesn't have to be laminated, but the teacher, being wanting to save things and reuse them in me, always wants to laminate it. But they would have a copy of the alphabet arc, and then students would have magnetic letters. They would take a magnetic letter such as P, they would pull it, recognize it's a P, and then find where the P is. Again, they would do that with each letter of the alphabet. If you're a kindergarten teacher, and I know we're in January now, so you would have introduced all the vowels and consonants, but if you hadn't at this point, you could just use the ones that you have introduced to give them practice with it. Then for less release, and for students that are ready to move on and have a more challenging activity, we have a partial alphabet arc. The partial alphabet arc is the same arc. You can see A is here, M and N is at the top, and then Z. but it's less support for students because what they're going to have to do is they would select a letter, D, and say, okay, A, B, C, D, it goes here. So again, it's just another step in rigor and complexity when students are ready for that. This is shown with capital letters, but you also can find alphabet arcs with lowercase letters if you want to use that practice in your classroom as well. And the exact standard that this activity relates to is right here, L.RFK1D. Recognize and name all upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet. So for every activity I'm going to show you today, I'm going to show you why it relates back to some of the language in those standards. So for print concepts, again, highly recommend alphabet arcs. Now let's dive into phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is for students in grades K and 1, just like print concepts. Here is the language for kindergarten. You can see here there's a few things that are highlighted in that light blue color. One piece that's completely new is D, and that says orally repeat multi-syllable words and pronounce the separate syllables. And I'm going to show you a great, fun, engaging activity for that in just a second. And then also that's new language. If here it says and medial, isolate and pronounce the initial, final, and medial phonemes in spoken single syllable words. And the committee wanted to add that and medial in there to make sure teachers understood that not only do we want to provide instruction with that initial phoneme and with the ending phoneme, but also around isolating that medial phoneme. Because in CVC words, that's going to be our short vowel sounds, our eh, I, and So the more practice we give, and sometimes those vowels and being able to differentiate the sounds in those can be tricky for students. So we want to make sure we're providing as many practice opportunities and explicit instruction around that. So that's why that language was added. So those are the minor changes for kindergarten. And here you can see first grade. First grade, there's nothing highlighted in light blue. The phonological awareness standards for first grade stay completely the same from 2016. Now, a great phonological awareness activity that you can use are syllable activities. We talked about how important it is for students to be able to, for phonological awareness, to be able to recognize words, syllables, onset and rhyme, and then the individual phonemes. Syllable activities are great because they can have students being tactile, multisensory, engaging their body. Some examples of syllable activities can be clapping out the syllables. They can stomp using their feet. They can stomp the syllables using their fist. And another great strategy is students can put their hands under their chin and say a multisyllabic word. So if I say the word dinosaur, dine-o-saur. And if you try it, if you put your hand under your chin and say dinosaur, dine-o-saur, you should feel your chin drop and hit your hand 3 times, meaning there's 3 syllables in that word. This is a really great engaging video I'm going to show you for multi-syllable words called stomping.
Stop and say is a strategy we can use to segment words into syllables. We use our hands to stomp each syllable as we say the word. Listen and watch as I stomp and say the word umbrella. 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 How many times did we stomp? 3. So there are 3 syllables in umbrella. What was the first syllable? What was the second syllable? Brill. What was the last syllable? La, umbrella. Stop and say is a
That was wonderful. I love that demo, but we don't have to watch it a second time. That activity directly relates back to that kindergarten standard, LRFK.2.D. Orally repeat multi-syllable words and pronounce the separate syllables. So again, that was new language right in those updated standards. And here's an activity that teachers can implement in their classrooms to help support that standard. So we talked about print concepts and phonological awareness. Let's move into phonics and word recognition. Phonics and word recognition is for students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade. I'm going to divide them by grades just so you can see all of the language. So here on the screen, you can see kindergarten and 1st grade. Like I said before, anything highlighted in that light blue is new. So what you're going to notice that's highlighted over and over again as a theme is grade level irregular words and parts that are irregular. So let me read the full thing for you. So for kindergarten C, for phonics and word recognition, the standard says read high frequency words and grade level irregular words with automaticity. So, what the committee found, and it goes back to some of the research behind the science of reading, is we really want to use some orthographic mapping and call out the irregular parts of words and have instruction around irregular words. So, that's called out in kindergarten. And then this standard right here that's highlighted in light blue, D, is also completely new language. Recognize the parts of high frequency words that are regular and the parts that are irregular. You're going to notice almost verbatim the exact language is added for first grade. F says read high frequency words and grade level irregular words with automaticity. And G says recognize the parts of high frequency words that are regular and the parts that are irregular. Very similar, if not identical, to kindergarten. You're going to notice the exact same thing in second and third grade. Second grade, F and G are new. F says read high frequency and grade level irregular words with automaticity, exact same language. They just gave different examples of second grade words. And identify the parts of high frequency words that are regular and the parts that are irregular. And for third grade, the new standard in language is E. Analyze the parts of high frequency words that are regular and the parts that are irregular. So the verb changed here. In second grade, it's identify. In third grade, it's more the critical thinking of analyzing. When we get into fourth and fifth grade, you'll notice nothing changes. The language of the standards is exactly the same from 2016. Now you might be thinking, okay, what is a phonics and word recognition activity or activities that I can use, especially having to do with irregular words and the parts of words that are regular? First, let's talk about orthographic mapping. So I'm not sure, again, I know most of you are around a 2, where you rated yourself in the science of reading journey, so you might be familiar with this, but I just want to briefly explain, just in case you're not. Orthographic mapping is a mental process. So it's something that occurs in our minds that all successful readers will use to help them become fluent readers. And when using orthographic mapping, students use that oral language processing part of their brain in the left hemisphere to connect the sounds of the words they already know, those sounds are the phonemes, to the letters in a word, and those are the graphemes. Once they do that, they permanently store the connected sounds and letters of words as instantly recognized sight words. And why this is important is, according to research by Dr. David Kilpatrick, in typically developing readers in grades 2 and above who have these orthographic mapping skills, they only need to see and read printed words between 1 and 4 times before they become permanently stored as sight words. So we know the more students are able to have those orthographic mapping skills, we're going to set them up for success, being able to have sight words, read with fluency, and then support their comprehension. And instruction in irregular words, we saw that language called out over and over again. And an example of irregular words could be was or said. When we are in classrooms and we see teachers instructing around irregular words, what we want to see is that it should promote students' orthographic mapping rather than just relying on visual memorization alone. Here's the word said, look at it, memorize it, you got it. We don't want that. We want to call attention to the phonemes and graphemes that are regular in the words. So when you're visiting classrooms, you should notice that teachers are pointing out the regular parts of a word where letters and sounds follow the expected patterns. And then you should see them drawing special attention to those irregular parts of the word. And let's take a look at an example. This is an instructional routine, and the teacher would be introducing the irregular word said. So the teacher would say, how many sounds do you hear in the word said? The students would listen to the sounds and answer 3. The teacher says, what are the sounds? And the students give the sounds, s, e, d. Then the teacher would show the word. Again, speech to print. In the word said, what makes the s sound? The students would say S. What makes the d? And they would say D, because we're calling attention to those parts that are regular. Now the teacher would say, what makes the eh sound? Well, normally in a closed syllable word, eh would be that short E. But what they would notice and say is it's AI. or drawing attention to that irregular part and talking about it. So the teacher would say, yes, it's AI. The word has an unexpected relationship between AI and the eh, that phoneme. What you might see in classrooms as well, or teachers, if you're in here, you might have tried this, is heart words. If you've ever seen a word wall with high frequency words and irregular words up, you might have seen a heart around certain parts of the word, and that's the irregular part of a word. So for said, the s follows the typical sound spelling pattern, so does d, but what's irregular is that eh sound. So we put a heart on it when we're teaching students that, so that way they know you need to learn this part by heart. That's the tricky part. And that's an example of how to use some orthographic mapping and heart words with irregular words. This directly relates back to all the standards you saw in kindergarten, first, second, and third, which identifying parts of high frequency words that are regular and then calling special attention to the parts that are irregular. So our last standard for K-5 for the RF standards is fluency. Fluency is for kindergarten through fifth grade. You'll see here the only thing that's highlighted in light blue is some language with kindergarten. And what that new language says is emergent reader texts, so reading them, including decodable text with one-to-one letter sound correspondence, orally with sufficient decoding and accuracy to support comprehension. So that new language just draws attention to emergent reader text and decodable text. Everything else in first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade stayed the same. And a great fluency activity that you can see in teachers' classrooms, teachers, if you're here, you can implement in your classroom, is fast phrases and sentences. Here's an example of fast phrases and sentences. There's multiple sentences you can see here, and then there's some phrases like you and I. What this is you would cut these up and students would practice saying them. The more students practice saying these words, it's going to help them with their automaticity and their expression. So eventually, instead of saying, I like them, they would scoop it and say, I like them, or you and I. So again, it's helping them with their expression and that automaticity. Something else that's wonderful for kindergarten and first grade is using these fast sentences or fast phrases, but only with whatever sound spelling pattern that the teacher is instructing on that week. So this is short A. So if I'm instructing my students in kindergarten that week on short A, I can give them a list of sentences to practice to help their expression, their automaticity, their accuracy. And what you'll notice about these sentences is they contain words that all have the short A, CVC, closed syllable words, and then it's a mix of some high frequency words that they would have already learned. So the man is sad. Here is a bag. So it's having them practice and again get more practice opportunities with that sound spelling pattern that the teacher is teaching that week for phonics. And this directly relates back to the standards we talked about in kindergarten, first, second, and even if you have students that are higher support in third, fourth, and fifth, they could provide practice with this. But that standard that I highlighted right here is the first grade standard. Read grade level text orally with accuracy, appropriate rate, and expression. All right, so we talked about the RF standards, the foundational skills for reading language. Now let's dive into our last part, the foundational skills for writing language. First, we have sound letter basics, and this is for students in kindergarten, first, and second grade. What you'll notice here is that everything, went too far, let me go back one. What you'll notice here is that everything is highlighted in light blue. Why that is that we talked about before, this is brand new. So all of this language is going to be new. What these standards do for sound letter basics is draw attention to demonstrating command of the conventions of writing. So I'm not going to read everyone to you, but I'll just pause for a moment and let you glance at the language of these new standards. And something that I noticed, I'm not sure if you did, is that for kindergarten, first and second grade, the language says write a common grapheme, which is a letter or letter group for each phoneme. You'll see that in kindergarten E, you'll notice that in first grade B, and you'll notice that in second grade B. So a great activity that teachers can use to support their students with that is L. Conan sound boxes with graphemes. And let me show you an example. So L-cone and sound boxes, they're simply that. It's a box. They're divided into columns. Normally, teachers would give students chips. You could use Unifix cubes. I know teachers are resourceful and admin and coaches, you are too, whatever you have in the building. And what students would do is the teacher would give the students a word without showing any letters or graphemes. And let's say I give you the word wet. They would take a bingo chip and they would push it up for each sound they hear. W, e, t. Then the next part, once they hear and can isolate and hear that there's three phonemes, there's three different sounds in the word, then they can write the corresponding grapheme that represents the phoneme. So for the first box, W is W, E is E, T is T. Students could move on to do things with digraphs or blends, vowel teams, whatever the progression is in kindergarten, first, and second grade. Teachers can use those phonemes and graphemes in their instruction. And that directly relates back to the standards that we looked at in kindergarten, first, and second grade. Here you can see I highlighted the first grade standard, write a common grapheme for each phoneme. All right, now let's move into spelling. So spelling standards are for students in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade. And the spelling standards draw attention to the need to demonstrate command of the conventions of encoding and spelling, because we saw we really want to highlight that encoding piece. And they did this in these spelling standards. Again, I'm not going to read to you, but I just want to give you a moment to look at the progression in kindergarten and first grade. Now let's take a look at the spelling standards for second grade. You can see that complexity is increasing. Now we're talking about position-based patterns, vowel-R combinations, suffixes, irregular words. Give you a moment to look at the standards for third and fourth grade. And something you might have noticed for third grade is the standard C, identify language of word origin. And I have a great activity for that I'm going to show you in just a minute. All right, so hopefully you got a chance to look at all these, see the progression of those spelling standards in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth. So you can see the complexity, the rigor increases in each grade level. So a spelling activity that I love, especially for that third grade, fourth grade, you can use it in second, you can use it in fifth and above, is using an online etymology dictionary. Some of you might have heard of etymology before. Some of you might be like, what are you talking about, Megan? But etymology is the study of the origin of words and how they've changed throughout history. And why that's important is understanding the history of a word can help students clarify its use by an author, and it helps them acquire new vocabulary. So here is an example of what this online etymology dictionary looks like. I'm going to click on it and bring it up for everyone. You'll see here you're able to type in any word that you want. So I'm just going to use the word biology. When you type in the word, you're going to see here it gives you the parts of speech, and it's going to give you where the origin, where it came from. It's etymology. So biology is a noun. It's the science of life and living things. It was from 1819. Its origin is Greek. It comes from bios, which means life, one's life or lifetime, and logi, which means study of. And if you're thinking, if students then understand, oh, okay, so bio means life, one's life or lifetime, so biography, oh, okay, that could be about someone's life. So there's so many different ways that once students understand the etymology or the origin of word, that they can apply it to helping understand new words. And again, that relates back to that third grade standard, identify the language of word origin. Again, it doesn't just have to be third grade though. You can use this so second, fourth, above. You can even use it with your younger students too, if you want to. All right, and then last, let's dive into sentence composition. So sentence composition standards are for K-5. Here you can see the kindergarten standards here. And what these standards do is draw attention to demonstrating command of the conventions of sentence composition. So that includes writing, syntax, and grammar. So here you can see write simple sentences, match periods, question marks, and exclamation points, use conjunctions. Here's the language in first grade. So they begin writing sentences with increasing complexity. Elaborate a simple subject or simple predicate. So again, there's very specific language and wording for what to do in each grade level and the progression in each grade level. Here you can take a look at the standards for second grade. Now we're going to talk about run-on sentences, fragments, apostrophes, linking sentences. Here we have third grade, using appropriate pronouns, regular and irregular plural forms, paraphrasing, which is huge. Here we can take a look at fourth grade. Moving on to quotation marks, dialogue. And then finally, you can take a look at fifth grade. So again, each one of those standards, it becomes the progression more complex as you go through kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. Wonderful activity that I love to use in kindergarten classrooms, you can use it in first grade as well, is dictation with sentence frames. And let me show you what that looks like. So with dictation, the teacher would orally say a sentence for the students. So in this case, the teacher would say, the cat is black. First, they'd say, how many words are in the sentence? So the students have to say, the cat is black. Okay, there's 4. Next, what the teacher would do, and if you use foundations in your school, you already have these sentence frames. If not, it's okay. You can use index cards, construction paper, whatever you have. Be resourceful. And they would put an index card or sentence frame to represent each word, making sure we have spaces between the words. So here's the sentence frame for the cat is black, and you would put a period at the end. And what you notice about the first sentence frame, it's in shape of an L, and what that denotes to our students is that's going to be a capital letter. Now, once the students understand how many words are in the sentence, they understand the spaces between the words, then they would write, the cat is black, capital T at the beginning, and a period at the end. And that directly relates back to some of those kindergarten standards we looked at. In particular, capitalize the first word in a sentence and include spaces between words. There also was language in those kindergarten standards for repeat a sentence, identify how many words are in a sentence. So this dictation activity actually checks a lot of those boxes for the language of those new sentence composition standards for kindergarten. All right, so we made it. You've been great so far. Thank you for listening talk for about 45 minutes. Now let's talk about some next steps. So what are some next steps and what are some resources for ongoing support? First, before we close out, I know we had a lot of information that filled our session today, but I'd love for you to think about what are you taking away from today? I don't know if you jotted anything down as I was talking today, or if you have something in your head like, oh, I want to talk about this with my teachers tomorrow. But what is one thing you learned today? I know the chat's not working, so if you could please go over to the Q&A, I would love for you to just write one activity, one idea, or anything that you're walking away from today that's new learning. Take my water while I'm looking to see some of these responses. Great, I'm seeing alphabet arcs, understanding orthographic mapping, that's fantastic. Orthographic mapping and the hands-on activities. Thank you so much for sharing. And hopefully everyone's able to walk away with not only one, but hopefully a variety of activities and evidence-based practices that you can implement in your schools and supporting your teachers. So what are some takeaways? You're going to receive a follow-up email in the next few days, and it's going to include a couple of different resources that are going to be so helpful, I promise. One is the revised NJSLS Foundational Standards Planning Sheet. A lot of words there, but what it is, it's a resource to ensure that your teachers have a thorough understanding of these revised foundational standards, and it will have a column for planning to help them plan some evidence-based practices and activities that are aligned to these revised standards. You're also going to receive the Foundational Skills Checklist. This checklist is a helpful tool for you leaders As you're in classrooms, it'll give you a quick snapshot as to if teachers are implementing evidence-based practices during certain parts of their literacy block. And then finally, you're going to receive a Science of Reading PLC schedule. And that's going to provide a suggested scope and sequence of PLC topics to cover that are aligned to the science of reading. So I have an evaluation for everyone as well. I'm going to put it in the chat now. Let me know if you're able to access this. I know some of you were saying you weren't going to be able to access the chat. So let me try to put this in here right now and we'll see if you can access it. Because I would love what it is just feedback on today's session. Any and all feedback, I'm always so open to. I love feedback. What are some next steps? What are some things you think were helpful? So if you can access that, I would really appreciate it. If any time today, you could please fill out that evaluation. If you're interested in a deeper dive, I know we had limited time together today, but if you're interested in a deeper dive into the foundational standards, we have a new workshop. It's called Unpacking and Aligning Practices to the Revised NJSLS-ELA Foundational Standards. And teachers will leave this workshop with a very thorough understanding of these revised foundational standards, as well as a variety of practices and activities that they can use in their classrooms during whole group, small group instruction, and independent work time. So feel free to check that out. And then last, I just want to thank you. If there's any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'm looking at it now. And if you're interested in any other resources or professional development, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Megan Conley, like I said, and my email address is megan.conley@inspiredinstruction.com. And I want to thank you for spending the end of your day, your very rainy, dreary Thursday afternoon with me. It was a pleasure being able to not see you, but to interact with you over the Q&A. And I look forward, like I said, if you have any questions or if you have any follow-up, please let me know. So again, thank you so much, and please take care and have a wonderful night and safe commute home. I see a lot of people saying chat disabled. If you can't fill out the survey, it's completely okay. And of course, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for taking your time on such a busy day and busy time of the year to join me today. I really appreciate it. You have any other questions? I'll wait around another minute. Just monitor the Q&A. But again, thank you so much for your time. There's no sign in. I see your question, Kelly. No sign in. But thank you for being here today. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Again, just want to say thank you so much to everyone. I really appreciate your time. And I hope you have a wonderful Thursday afternoon, a safe drive home, and have a wonderful Friday and weekend. Take care.